The diner smelled like burnt coffee and early morning hope, the kind that clung to the air long after the sun had risen and the night shift workers had gone home. It was the kind of place where stories sat quietly between chipped mugs and cracked vinyl booths, waiting for someone patient enough to notice them. She had been on her feet since before dawn, tying her apron with fingers that still ached from yesterday's double shift, whispering a small prayer she didn't even know she still believed in. Her name badge said Mara, though most people never read it. To them, she was just another waitress, another face trained to smile no matter how heavy the day felt. The bell above the door rang softly as a man walked in, his presence subtle but somehow commanding. He didn't wear anything loud, no designer logos or attention-grabbing shine. His jacket was neat, his shoes clean, his posture calm. He chose a booth by the window, one that caught the late morning light, and sat as though he had nowhere else in the world to be. Mara noticed him because she noticed everyone. Years of waiting tables had trained her to read people the way others read menus. This man carried silence differently. Not cold, not distant, just full, like his thoughts were crowded but well-ordered. She approached with her usual gentle tone, the one she saved for mornings when her chest felt tight and the world felt expensive. He ordered simply, coffee, eggs, toast, no substitutions, no impatience. He thanked her when she poured the coffee, looking up just long enough for her to catch his eyes, steady, observant, kind in a way that didn't ask for praise. The diner moved in its usual rhythm. Plates clinked. Someone laughed too loudly at the counter. The radio murmured an old song about second chances. Mara moved from table to table, refilling cups, wiping spills, carrying plates that felt heavier as the hours passed. Every so often, she glanced at the man by the window. He ate slowly, thoughtfully, as if each bite had meaning. When he finished, he folded his napkin neatly and placed it beside his plate. When she brought the check, he smiled and said, "No rush." She nodded, grateful for the absence of pressure. When she returned later, the plate was empty, the coffee cup untouched for a while, and the check folded once, then twice, then placed carefully beneath the edge of the plate. She cleared the table automatically, muscle memory guiding her hands. It wasn't until she reached for the check that she noticed the receipt. The tip line was empty, zero, clean, intentional. Her chest tightened, not in anger, but in that familiar ache of disappointment she had learned to swallow whole. It wasn't about the money alone, though she needed it more than she liked to admit. It was the quiet sting of being unseen, of pouring warmth into the world and watching it disappear without echo. She told herself not to assume. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he was distracted. Maybe he thought tipping was optional. She folded the receipt and slipped it into her apron, already rehearsing the small lie she'd tell herself to get through the rest of the shift. But when she lifted the plate, something slid slightly beneath it. At first, she thought it was another napkin. Then she noticed the weight. She looked around instinctively, but the booth was empty. The man was gone. The door hadn't even chimed. Her heart thudded once, sharp and uncertain, as she reached under the plate and pulled out what had been hidden there. It was an envelope. Plain. No name. No seal. Just thick, heavy paper folded once. Her breath caught as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, the ink dark and deliberate. And beneath it, far beneath it, was something that made her hands tremble so badly she had to sit down. The note read, "Some gifts are meant to be found when no one is watching. Thank you for treating me like I mattered." She stared at the words, reading them again and again, as if they might change if she blinked. Beneath the note was a check, not a receipt, not a bill. A check. Her mind refused to process the number at first. It felt unreal, like a typo or a cruel joke. She counted the zeros once, then again. Her vision blurred. This wasn't a tip. This was more money than she had ever seen in one place. More than she made in a year. More than she thought people like her were allowed to touch. Her knees gave way, and she sat hard in the booth, the vinyl squeaking beneath her. Her heart pounded so loudly she worried someone might hear it. She looked around again, half expecting someone to snatch it back, to laugh and tell her it was a mistake, but no one came. Her fingers shook as she folded the check back into the envelope. 1,000 thoughts rushed in at once. Rent overdue, school fees, the broken heater at home, the shoes her daughter had outgrown, the constant, exhausting math of survival. Tears welled up before she could stop them, blurring the diner into soft shapes and colors. She pressed her palm over her mouth, trying to breathe quietly, trying not to draw attention. This kind of miracle felt fragile, like it might vanish if spoken aloud. Her manager noticed her sitting and frowned, walking over with concern. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just dizzy for a second." He nodded back, distracted, already thinking about the lunch rush. She watched him walk away, then looked down at the envelope again, as if it might start breathing. When her shift ended, she didn't clock out right away. She sat in the break room, staring at the scuffed floor, replaying every moment with the man, his calm voice, the way he looked at her like she mattered, the absence of judgment, the intentional kindness wrapped in anonymity. She wondered if he knew what this would mean to her, if he could imagine the weight lifting from her chest, the doors quietly unlocking in her mind. Or maybe he did know. Maybe that was the point. Outside, the afternoon sun warmed the cracked pavement. She stepped into it slowly, clutching her bag like it contained something fragile, which it did. Not just money, but possibility. On the bus ride home, she watched the city pass by in familiar blurs. The same streets she'd walked 1,000 times looked different now, not because they had changed, but because something inside her had. She thought about her daughter waiting at home, about the way she'd smile when she saw her mother walk in, tired but trying. She thought about the bills stacked on the kitchen table, the ones she'd stopped opening right away because they made her chest hurt. For the first time in a long while, she imagined a future that didn't feel like a hallway with no doors. When she got home, she didn't tell anyone right away. She sat at the small kitchen table and placed the envelope in front of her, just looking at it. She whispered a quiet thank you, not to the man, not even to fate, but to the moment itself, to the reminder that kindness could arrive without warning, without conditions, without applause. Later that night, after her daughter had fallen asleep with a book on her chest, she pulled out a notebook she hadn't touched in years. She began to write, not numbers, not plans, but thoughts. Dreams she had once buried because they felt too big, too risky, too indulgent for someone just trying to survive. She wrote about going back to school, about opening a small place of her own someday, somewhere warm and welcoming, about helping others the way she had been helped, quietly without needing to be seen. Days passed, and the world didn't suddenly become perfect. Problems didn't vanish. Life didn't slow down to applaud her. But something steady had taken root inside her, a belief, a knowing. That kindness, when given freely, could ripple outward in ways no one could measure. She never saw the man again. Not at that diner, not on the street, not in passing. Sometimes she wondered if she would recognize him if she did. Sometimes she hoped she wouldn't. The mystery felt sacred. Weeks later, as she stood behind the counter during another early shift, the bell above the door rang again. She looked up out of habit, her heart skipping just slightly, not because she expected anything, but because hope had quietly learned how to live inside her again. And as she poured coffee for a tired couple who looked like they hadn't slept in days, she smiled with a softness that came from somewhere deeper than politeness. She didn't know what their story was. She didn't know what burdens they carried. But she knew this: kindness once received had a way of insisting on being passed on. She slid the cups toward them, warm and steady, and for a brief moment, the world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next, waiting for the next quiet miracle to unfold, waiting for another life to shift in a way no one could predict. waiting for the unseen threads of generosity to continue weaving their way through ordinary days, connecting strangers, healing small fractures, and reminding hearts that even in the Saint unremarkable places, something extraordinary could still be quietly beginning. And so the story does not end with applause or a grand revelation, but with something far more powerful, a quiet transformation that keeps moving long after the moment has passed, because what truly changed that day was not just her bank balance or her circumstances, but the way she began to see herself in the world. She no longer moved through life as someone waiting to be rescued. She walked forward as someone who had been reminded of her worth. In the weeks that followed, she carried that lesson like a lantern inside her chest. When exhaustion crept in, it didn't crush her the way it once had. When fear whispered that she wasn't enough, another voice now answered back, calm and steady, saying, "You are seen. You matter. You always have." And with that voice came courage, not loud or dramatic, but persistent, the kind that shows up every morning and chooses hope again. She began to give differently too, not recklessly, not to empty herself, but intentionally. A warmer smile, a few extra minutes of listening, a gentle word when someone looked like they were breaking quietly inside. She learned that generosity wasn't about how much you had, but how deeply you understood the weight of being human. The world did not suddenly become kind everywhere she went. There were still long shifts, difficult days, and moments when the future felt uncertain. But now she knew something unshakable. Kindness has a memory. It echoes. It moves from one heart to another, changing shape but never losing its power. Somewhere out there, someone else would one day sit where she once sat, tired, unseen, wondering if effort still mattered. And when that moment came, she would be ready, not because she was rich or healed or perfect, but because she remembered how it felt to be lifted without being asked to. Explain her pain. And maybe that is how the world truly changes, not through grand gestures or loud declarations, but through quiet acts that rewrite a person's belief about their own worth. One table at a time, one moment at a time, one act of kindness that refuses to be forgotten. Because sometimes what looks like the end of a small story is actually the beginning of 1,000 others, unfolding gently, carried forward by hearts that learned, once and for all, that kindness never disappears. It only waits for someone brave enough